So here, let's continue with hepatitis A. Sort of the fact sheet right here. We mentioned earlier that the viral infection is spread when fecal matter enters the mouth. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody's eating poop, but it means that it's usually fecal oral. That means contaminated water. And so I told you already that it spreads easily among homeless populations where sanitary conditions are just not that good. The symptoms are gastrointestinal, so nausea, vomiting, and then it's spread through direct contact, food, beverages, cups, spoons. So here is a slide that shows the hepatitis A fever that kind of goes up and down, so undulating, that's what that's called, for the first week, and then it kind of goes down. And here the hepatitis A jaundice that appears when the liver is inflamed. It will no longer be able to process the hemoglobin, and the pigmentation then ends up being deposited. So these breakdown products from the recycling of red blood cells, they will then be deposited in the white of your eye or under the skin, and that's what we know as jaundice. Moving on to hepatitis B virus, that's the cause of hepatitis B. Here we have a double-stranded DNA virus with envelope. The DNA, or the nucleic acid in this virus, is partly single-stranded, as you can see. So here would be the double-stranded portion of the viral genome, and then here we have the single-stranded portion. Right here, single-stranded DNA. We have the family of the Hepatnaviridae, and one interesting thing about hepatitis B is that about half of the hepatitis B virus infections are subclinical, so the HBV here. And 1% are sudden and severe. Here's the structure of the hepatitis B virus. So we have the mostly double-stranded but partially single-stranded DNA in the core right here. Then the envelope portion right here on top, the envelope, and then here we have the viral capsid portion right here, down here in blue. So here the disease progression, it's very chronic. You have the illness period, 10 to 20 weeks right here. At the end of this illness, the viral antigens, they will go down, the numbers, but the hepatitis B antibodies will be on the rise, and then the disease progression is very chronic in this case. Here's somebody with hepatitis B jaundice. Also, again, the liver is inflamed and doesn't process the recycling products from red blood cells recycling correctly, and so you have these colored byproducts that will then be deposited under the skin because the liver is not processing them correctly. Here are the hepatitis B symptoms. So you're going to have a fever, the pain and tenderness in the abdominal area right around the liver area, so that would be what you see right here. The liver is inflamed. You may or may not have a rash, and then the yellowing of the skin, the jaundice. Another thing that's to be pointed out, because the liver doesn't process these pigmented metabolic products from the recycling of red blood cells, so that's what normally makes your fecal matter is brown, and if the liver doesn't put these pigmented substances in there, then the fecal material is going to be white. It looks like clay. So you have light colored feces and dark urine, because now these byproducts, they end up being excreted at least partially via the kidneys. Our third hepatitis virus will be hepatitis C. There are more, but we're just going to be happy with hepatitis A, B, and C. So here, this is the most serious one. Not that hepatitis B isn't, but hepatitis C pretty much inevitably leads to liver cancer within 10 years, and there's pretty much no escape. So here's a comparison of hepatitis A, B, and C viruses. You have hepatitis A in purple, hepatitis B in sort of light blue, and then here in orange, hepatitis C virus. What's concerning is the increase in numbers, because this is such a severe disease, and you end up pretty much inevitably with liver cancer. So that's definitely a concern when the numbers are on the rise. The profile of hepatitis C, we have a single-stranded RNA virus with envelope in the family of the Flaviviridae. The transmission is same as hepatitis B, so that would be typically through blood products, direct contact with blood. That's why healthcare workers need to be vaccinated against hepatitis B. Incubation period anywhere from 2 to 22 weeks, so highly variable. The initial symptoms are usually mild or don't even exist, but then over 50% of the cases become chronic, eventually severe. And as I said, within 10 years, you're going to end up with liver cancer, and nobody can do anything for you anymore. There is no vaccine against hepatitis C, something to keep in mind. Hepatitis A and B have vaccines available, not hepatitis C. So here's an image showing what happens to the liver in the progression of hepatitis infections. And so a healthy liver over here, everything looks good. Chronic hepatitis, you can see the tissue damage, and then liver cancer over here. This liver will shut down. So our last virus in this pathogen group, number 2, will be the Epstein-Barr Virus, abbreviated EBV. It's the cause of infectious mononucleosis, or otherwise known as mono, and also it can lead to Burkitt's lymphoma. So we have a double-stranded DNA virus with envelope. It's in the group of the herpes viruses, so the herpes viridae. Specifically, it's HHV4, human herpes virus type 4, or number 4. It infects B lymphocytes and also epithelial cells. The vast majority of the world's population is infected with this virus, but it's latent in most people and doesn't really cause any problems. Here are some images that show, you may have heard that infectious mono spreads easily when people are sharing utensils, spreads easily in dorms, also by kissing somebody. It typically leads to throat problems. So you're going to have a very, very sore throat, and also you might have some sores in your mouth, but the very typical symptom is just a really sore throat. And then here is sort of the infection cycle of Epstein-Barr virus. So it gets in right here by kissing somebody or sharing utensils with somebody. Then it can infect epithelial cells or B cells, and it might stay latent in B cells for a while, for a long time, in fact, but then it can actually switch over from a latent infection to the lytic infection. So that would be actively producing viruses, and now these viruses, they are spreading through the body and can cause the problem. Most people that get infected with Epstein-Barr virus get infected early on in childhood or even infancy. Usually doesn't cause any problems. It may cause a little bit of a fever, feeling under the weather, fatigue, but it's usually mild. But then some people, they end up with these mono symptoms, and that's basically chronic fatigue, like severe fatigue. Fever may or may not be there, but the sore throat. So the main symptoms would be fatigue and sore throat. You also have these swollen lymph glands. So in infectious mononucleosis, you're going to have the fever, lymphadenopathy, that means the swollen lymph nodes, pharyngitis, the sore throat, extreme fatigue. You really don't want to do anything, you just want to lay in bed. And it's pretty chronic, so it can last somewhere between 1 to 3 months typically. And the symptoms are produced by the T cells fighting the abnormal, these infected B cells. So let's finish off here with by looking at some diseases that are associated with Epstein-Barr virus. If the EBV infects the B cells, then we have the infectious mononucleosis, and you may also end up with Hodgkin's disease, Hodgkin's lymphoma, Burkitt's lymphoma, or lymphoproliferative disease, but the most important ones here would be, again, the infectious mononucleosis, otherwise known as mono, and then Hodgkin's disease, Burkitt's lymphoma. If the EBV infects other cells, you may end up with nasopharyngeal carcinoma, gastric carcinoma, T-cell, natural killer cell lymphomas, all sorts of lymphomas here, hairy leukoplakia, and let's take a look at what that might look like. So here again, the mononucleosis causes, the typical thing would be the fatigue and the sore throat, the swollen lymph nodes. Those are very consistent symptoms. Some people also have a fever. And here's this poor kid with a Burkitt's lymphoma. Here, a co-infection with malaria causes this massive extra growth right here, this cancerous type of growth. And Epstein-Barr virus is also associated with Hodgkin's disease, so Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then the nasal and gastric cancers that you had up here as well. Gastric carcinoma right here. Okay, that's it for this pathogen group. Be sure that you are filling out your pathogen sheets, because our final exam still will be the pathogen test, and so make sure that you're organized, that you have your information organized and together in a binder. Also, you need to study this for our next lab quiz, which will have quite a bit of information and questions about this pathogen group in it.